Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Changing the Climate, a show where we talk about the changing world around us and how we can make it better. Brought to you by Climate Change Realty. All right, hello, everyone, and we are back. I am very happy and lucky to have Susie Strife on the show. Susie, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I'm excited.
Very good. So I just love to get the show started by getting a little background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing today.
Sure. Well, I'm the director of the Office of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience in Boulder County. So it's a dream job. And I think when I was reflecting on this earlier this week about how did I end up here, really for me, it's all about how my childhood shaped my interest in environmental protection. And I think research has now shown that early experiences in nature do lead to lifelong environmental concern. And I was so lucky to grow up in a family, even if it was Cincinnati, Ohio, a very suburban neighborhood, but I played so much in the backwoods and my parents were nature lovers. And I just had a deep bond with nature early in life. And I really do believe that that's led me on my career path. And so I ended up at Middlebury College, which is very well known for environmental conservation and sustainability. And I was blown away to enter, college where these subjects, environmental protection and conservation biology, where world-class professors were teaching these things. And I was in the Green Mountains skiing and mountain biking and playing in the woods while learning from the best of the best, and had just such a privileged opportunity to hone in on what I really wanted to do. And I think at that point, sustainability as a term and as a field didn't really exist. It was just on the cusp of burgeoning. And so we just used environmental conservation or conservation biology as sort of the entry point, or environmental studies, if you will, as the entry point to sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always the kid who was like, if I was on an airplane, I'd ask like the pilot, why don't you recycle? What's up with Delta? And then I'd write a letter to.
At what age?
I was like 8 or 9. I just
funny.
noticed these things and observed, like as a kid, it doesn't make sense. Even my daughter now, when, we do drop off or something at school, and she looks around and she's like, well, it doesn't make any sense why these cars are idling, or why we're still driving gas powered cars. Like it doesn't, as a child, it's so objective. It's like, why are we doing this? So I was always that kid who was just really, very emotionally in tune with like the natural world, and why are we doing these things that actually hurt it. And so I was very, I was very interested in learning about sort of the environmental psychology and sociology when I entered college. And then that led me to a career in teaching and environmental science out in Colorado, and stint in Costa Rica. And then finally, I really honed in, like, I really want to understand why certain people are interested in conservation and sustainability and environmental protection, and why culturally or psychologically people are not. And so I applied for the PhD program at CU. Wow. And got in, and have been focused ever since on answering that question.
Very interesting. Do you think it's these values that particularly drew you to the University of Colorado, or is it the nature? What was it?
Well, I got a really big grant to come to Colorado. I was looking for help with, I didn't want to be in student debt. And so the National Science Foundation was funding students who were really interested in taking their knowledge from what they were learning in their PhD or in their master's programs and putting it into the sixth grade classrooms. So I got such a beautiful opportunity to take what I was learning in real time in terms of sustainability and environmental studies and bring that to a wonderful sixth grade class once or twice a week. And that just sealed the deal for me to stay in Colorado for my PhD. So I was really lucky.
Yeah, aren't we all, just to be alive? But
fully.
Yeah, I'm curious, how can one define what it would mean to live sustainably? And I've also been looking into this regenerative agriculture in the way of kind of trying to heal the planet, because we've already, as you mentioned, you mentioned idling and you mentioned recycling, which is involved with idling would be using energy for no reason. But I am intrigued about, because wording's so important, trying to get the message out. We want to have a coherent message and we're all trying to understand these issues. What does it mean to you personally to live a sustainable life?
Yeah, such a good question, especially adding regenerative in there too. So, sustainability really means meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So, in other words, it's really, and Boulder County residents, by the way, it's over 70% of them can define it and define it that way in a similar fashion. We did a statistically significant survey, and they all define it similarly: living light on the earth, not taking more than what you need, and not compromising the ability of future generations to have what they need. Now, regeneration, which is a new term and an exciting term, in my opinion, and it takes
Definitely.
sustainability a step further, which really is seeking to maintain. Sustainability is maintaining our systems
Hmm.
without degrading them, but regeneration is really practicing the restoration and regeneration of our systems. And so it's often used in regenerative agriculture because there are certain amazing practices, by the way, that a lot of our Boulder County farmers are already doing that restore the health of our soils. And in restoring the health of our soils, so many other co-benefits come with that. For example, increased water retention in our soils, increase microbiome of the soils, um, carbon sequestration. So, sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. So and then higher nutrient dense foods. So there's so much in the sort of regenerative space that's coming to life. And it's funny because that's a practice that's ancient. And so we've gotten
Yeah.
so far, by applying synthetic fertilizers or those pesticides, et cetera. We've gotten so far from practices that were once, very well known and just done logically to preserve, our soil health. And now we're just trying to incentivize getting back to that and
Absolutely.
replacing those synthetics with just natural practices.
Fair enough. So this might be a bit of a heavy question, but I'm curious, how do you think we ended up at this state where it seems like you and I are maybe this regenerative community or people wanting to live sustainably are kind of starting to get more and more prominence in the media and culture? How do you think we ended up at this point where you're like the weird 8-year-old on the plane saying, "Why do you guys do this?" But like everyone just does it, just like you know what I'm saying?
So I think a lot of it comes down to, our disconnect as a society from the
Yeah,
natural world. And it's such a theme in my study. I actually wrote my dissertation on that very thing, like the
great.
nature deficit disorder. It's a real thing. We're growing up in a world that values convenience, and indoor activities. Children right now are on electronic media around 46 to 50 hours a week. I mean, that's a
Wow.
full-time job comparatively to a generation ago where unstructured nature play, go in the backyard, figure it out, go on your bike, go down to the creek. And it's not that you need major preserved spaces to connect with
Hmm.
nature. You just need a ditch. You're a kid, you're going to look for a bug,
Yeah.
you're going to look under a rock. And it's building that emotional bond at an early age. And I think when we've gotten away from that, it's really damaged us because we are part of nature. And I think it's harder to protect something that you don't love, and it's harder to protect something that you don't have a relationship with. Now, I will say, the next generation, the Sunrise Movement, they're amazing. They are a group of people, and they may have strong connections or not, but they care about the way the world is headed. And they are being very loud as a movement to say this is not okay. It's a
It's our
basic
world
human
too.
right. Yeah, it's a basic, sustainability should be a basic human right. I mean, a clean environment should be clean water, clean air, all those things should be in our constitution as a basic, health,
Yeah.
human right. So
Yeah.
I think it's powerful that it's churning, but it's unfortunately a majority of our society is urban based, and we live in a world that's disconnected. I love sort of the pilot programs and all of the work being done in urban centers to make that connection deeper, whether it's through rooftop gardens or environmental education programs. I mean, it doesn't take much for us to rebuild that connection, which is so cool. It's
Yeah.
just,
No, I think we just have to to show a focus on it and kind of convince people that it is good for everyone to have this reconnect. I'm curious how you got from your PhD to being the director of sustainability and climate action resilience in Boulder.
Well, when I was finishing my doctorate, I was looking, I'm a yes person. I love saying yes to really anything that comes my way that seems like a really good opportunity. And I was working multiple jobs during graduate school, and an internship opportunity came up in the Boulder County Commissioner's office, working directly for the commissioners as a sustainability intern. And I was
Cool.
up at CU. It was just interesting timing because I was finishing my doctorate, and I was like, "Ooh, am I going to take an internship after after getting this fancy degree?" But I actually was really like motivated and humbled by what local governments are able to do, especially with progressive leadership. So I jumped in to an internship as the first sustainability sort of person at Boulder County, and
Amazing.
had such an awesome time learning from the great Will Torr, who's been mayor of City of Boulder and then county commissioner, and now he's the director of the Colorado Energy Office. I mean, I just had mentors who were just shaping my entire entrance point, and that's how I work. Even though I love academia, I actually learned through experience. So they just threw me
Fair
to the
enough.
fire, and I was running all sorts of programs at Boulder County without, knowing really what I was doing.
Any
And that was
particularly memorable experiences?
so yeah, I mean, we ran the first financing clean energy financing program for residential clean energy in the entire nation, and that was amazing. And we got People of the Year award in 2009. That was Commissioner Torr and I, and Ann Livingston, who was the first sustainability coordinator. So it was just a beautiful time of learning, and also just like understanding that I might not be going down the academic path, that local government and action on the local scale actually can matter. And I was really enthused by the practicality and the implementation piece of local government. I was like, wow, we're actually doing stuff, we're creating policy, we're creating services. And so it hasn't stopped since that point. And that was 13 years ago.
Wow.
And just, we just formed a department last year, which is Office of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience.
Oh, I
And
see.
we have 25 people who are working for the Office of Sustainability, and it's just been incredible ever since. But that
It
doesn't
sound
mean that it's daunting. There's a lot to do.
as is in life always. But you
Yeah.
have a focus on three specific topics, if I'm not mistaken, which is clean energy, finance, and climate action. Can you talk about why you guys chose those in particular?
So the Office of Sustainability actually has way more than that. We have zero
Okay.
waste, regenerative ag, transportation electrification. We have all sorts of great stuff. Those are just three areas that I have expertise in.
Okay.
So we have subject matter expertise in all the other areas, like air quality, for example. Boulder County's air quality, we received an F. It's terrible. So we have
Yeah.
air quality specialists looking at the intersection between climate and air quality and public health. We have folks who are looking at transportation emissions and how do we electrify, our own internal fleet as well as our transportation resources. So it's way bigger than I think probably is online at this point, but those are my particular expertise areas.
Fair enough. I'm curious what your personal opinions are through all these, sounds like almost 2 decades of experience studying climate action and environmentalism in general. What's your opinion on how to most effectively combat this challenge? And that's kind of the main goal of this show, is for me to kind of figure out how I can craft a plan to have the most impact in an effective way.
That's such an important question, and one that our team talks about constantly.
I'm sure.
At one point, it was individual action. All
Hmm.
local governments were trying to, inspire and motivate and incentivize the individual to behave in a way that, helped with climate protection.
Tough job.
At this point, it's really about collective action and regional change, game-changing innovation, technology, to ensure a low carbon future. So it's not that local action, that individual action doesn't matter. It does, but it has to be a collective movement. So ambitious climate action will only happen if the public is organized to demand it. And so that collective action can roll up into something much greater. I have a really interesting example. One man just last week sent me an email through a public forum that said, look, I've done everything to my home, to my car. I have solar, I have, thermal heat pump, I have it all. And I still am not, what is this doing? What am I actually, what are the changes on a greenhouse gas emission reduction scale?
Huh.
And he's right. Like, he is doing everything correct. And so should a bunch of other people. But he was also pointing out the cost. You'd spent $90,000 on all these upgrades. And so it has to be a societal shift. It has to be, local and national governments, state governments setting the stage for making these technologies affordable and having access for these game-changing solutions for everyone. Because if it's one thing to ask early adopters to do it, who have the resources, but it's a whole nother thing for an entire society to move in that direction. And we have to make the right choice, the only choice, right? That there
Yeah.
is no choice to buy gas, combustion vehicle anymore. That the only choice is electric, and that there's affordable options so there's access for all, and that the secondary market, for example, of electric vehicles is more accessible and affordable. So those types of things, I think, would really help move the needle in terms of pushing climate action forward.
Fair enough. What do you think about the interactions between corporations and governments? Because it sounds like you're talking about the governments kind of changing the laws and incentivizing
Mhm.
corporations and individuals to do stuff like that. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to find a way to get the grassroots. I always talk about this. The grassroots, the corporations, and the governments. We all need to work in unison, and I'm trying to figure out how we can do that.
Well, it's what's so amazing about the private sector. And by the way, every success we've had, major success in terms of high impact, in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions reductions, have been public-private partnerships. So, like,
Very cool.
we really do work with the private sector all the time because they can set the stage in such an incredible way. For example, if Amazon makes one decision to eliminate, for example, plastic packaging
That'd be
in
great.
anything that they offer, that would be game changing, because on the consumer side, you're just trying to consume and make do and get through the day with your family. It has to be producer responsibility. And in order to do that, you need incentives to make it happen, to make it cost competitive to what's already
Mm.
occurring, which is also highly subsidized. The fossil fuel industry and plastics are highly subsidized, right? So you have to figure out a way to get corporations to say yes, and they're ready. I mean, the private sector has put out a lot of amazing commitments, and they're the ones who are doing 300 to 500 megawatts of solar to offset their own energy use. They are actually game-changing institutions, and the private sector is really making it happen. And I think local governments and national governments and state, that's why communities for climate action is so important. Making sure that we're setting the standard and the expectation vis-a-vis regulation and policy, so that there's market signals. There's market signals and there's policy to ensure that those changes happen.
Are you
And
aware
it's
of any other?
normalized. Sorry, I get
Yeah,
excited.
no,
And then it's normalized,
please do.
right? And
Yeah,
and
and
so bad behavior is not acceptable, and it's normalized to do the right thing. It's normal to be sustainable. It's not special or outside of the cultural norm, right? Like, I don't know. I just think, like, all the labels that we have, organic, B Corp, like a non-GMO, that's awesome. But that's really saying, oh, we have to go outside the norm
hmm.
to do all of this stuff, and it's more expensive, and the consumer has to pay for it. It has to be completely just the right normal choice to, to have whatever consumption product at the end of the day that is more sustainable, that is regenerative, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it's very challenging to create a new norm. I don't think it's challenging to create a new norm. I think it's challenging to do it in the time that we need, because the way I see it as a young person, we're already way past the time where we should have gotten started with heavy action. So now every single day that goes by, we need to do more and more. Are you aware of any other counties with roles like such as yours, either in Colorado or outside?
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. The entire industry of sustainability directors or coordinators or chief sustainability officers, a lot of folks are calling them now, has exploded. My barometer of success of how wide this position has become is my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, which is pretty conservative and not necessarily known for environmental conservation. And they have had an energy manager and now a chief sustainability officer. So it is happening. It's flourishing across major cities, and local governments have been playing in the last 4 years, at least, the role. If yeah, I mean, they're the ones on the stage of showcasing what's possible in terms of piloting different projects and programs and services and policies to be able to showcase the success of those and then for those to be replicated at scale. So that's why these positions at the local government exist, not only for localized climate action and local policies, but also to showcase this is possible and that our community demands this. And this is what, we can do nationally if we want.
The new norm, the better norm.
Yes, the new norm.
I like it. So as I'm aware, do you do some teaching at the university as well?
Yeah, I've been teaching for the last decade in all sorts of different departments up there. Started in the environmental studies department, then moved over to this amazing graduate program called the Masters of the Environment program, MENV program. And I teach sustainability in practice. So basically, I come in and teach the students what I've been doing on a day-to-day basis, whether it's looking at regenerative agricultural practices, for example, or funding an innovation fund for low carbon technology or carbon capture. And we go through what role does local government play in fostering sustainable behavior and ensuring that our communities are protected. And so it's been a blast. The graduate students are by far my favorite group to work with, although I really do still love the undergrad. And I love mentoring because I had such amazing mentors. I mean, some of the best. And I just feel like it's a recycled energy. Like they provide me with questions that I have yet to answer. It's awesome. Just like this podcast, like I'm inspired by the questions and then I get remotivated and re-energized by their interest and commitment in this field. So it's been amazing. And I have all sorts of mentees all over the state. And it's just been an honor really to be in that position, to be able to share knowledge and also just to be re-inspired in what I do.
Absolutely. I think energy always goes both ways, especially in a positive sense. I'm curious what advice you have for an upcoming generation who might not have had the honor of taking a class with you, but who wants to get involved in these issues and making a better future for everyone.
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I tell my students is if you're passionate about a certain area of sustainability, let's say it's transportation or local food and ag, zero waste, find the person that's doing that in your community and say, what can I do to help? That 9 times out of 10, if you're there with a bright mind and energizing, philosophy, like you are going to get a job or an internship or learn. And regardless of whether you're paid or not, it's an experience of a lifetime to understand what the local community is doing. And there's so much going on here, especially in Boulder, Colorado. I mean, we are the hotbed of sustainability and clean tech. Yeah. So, I mean, I always say that there's a person out there who wants to nurture your interest. And so just go and find them and continue to email and get a quick, coffee chat or online chat and tell them that you want to be involved. And there's no way that you can say no to a free, wonderful young person to want to invest their time and their energy. So it's pretty awesome that a lot of the students have done that and they're really working towards building their career off of something that's tangible in the community.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. And then the more and more I learn about it, the more and more it seems the answers doesn't lie in laws or legislation, but it's really, we are the government, we are the people, we are the solution. And every time you talk to someone, you make a connection and we get more educated on these issues and how to create a better society. I think you can never take a step in the wrong direction reaching out to someone. I'm just curious if you could tell me a little bit about communities for climate action before we kind of sign off.
Sure. I'm glad you asked because it's truly one of the most powerful, I think, impactful organizations in the state of Colorado. And it's one that we launched in collaboration with our friends at the city of Boulder. So I want to make this a short story, but I'm just going to go into depth for 1 minute because it's worth
Please
it.
do.
When local communities are looking at where they are in terms of their progress toward climate action, oftentimes they do this thing called a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and that's a diagnostic tool that showcases all the different sectors and where the emissions are coming from in your community. And for example, a third of our emissions come from transportation. 65% of our emissions in Boulder County come from our commercial and residential buildings. And so that's why services start to spawn up to support the reduction of emissions in those sectors, right? We did an inventory in 2005, which is our baseline. And then we've done inventories ever since in 5 year increments. And unfortunately, what we see is very minimal, despite a lot of investment, despite a lot of services and programs. You actually see very little dips in emissions locally.
Huh.
And you ask yourself, well, why is that? And here's a big dip in transportation, and that's directly related to a national federal policy. And we saw some dips in emissions, and they were directly related to national and statewide policies. For example, the renewable portfolio standard impacted our emissions on the energy side because that is a policy that requires utilities for a certain percentage of their electricity to come from solar. So you start to see the writing on the wall, how important policy is.
Yeah.
So policy actually impacts the stuff and not necessarily local action. You can't necessarily see it in those diagnostic tools. And so the city of Boulder and Boulder County launched this idea of let's create a local government-based collaborative, and we'll see who we can get involved in this statewide organization that is committed to policy change. And we went and shopped it around for years. This was in 2016. And we got Fort Collins to sign on. And then we got Aspen to sign on. And so the usual suspects were like, yeah, this makes sense. And
Yeah.
so what's so neat about the organization itself is it's really a unique coalition in the fact that it's local governments coming together to get one voice around climate action. And we use those membership dues to pay for lobbyists at the state capitol.
Okay.
And those lobbyists take our legislative agenda and fight on behalf of all these communities. And 35 local communities across the state of Colorado are now invested in this. And that's 1 out of every 7 Coloradoans. So it's really inspiring
Wow.
state and federal policy through a sort of a collective effort. That's the best I can describe it. I get really excited about it.
No, that's amazing. And you're extremely inspiring, and everything you've said today on the podcast is really awesome. So you mentioned this person who spent, close to $100,000 trying to make sure that their personal impact is helping the world as much as possible. You've spent your entire career basically focusing on these issues. Sounds like the three of us are pretty similar. We have this big picture mindset. I'm curious, how do you think we can effectively get the community like Boulder to realize that these changes that we make can actually change the entire globe if we set a good enough example and create this new norm of a regenerative society, or we heal the world? I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
No, I do. I mean, I think our residents are ready. I mean, they have been ready, and they're becoming more and more aware. You cannot deny the climate impacts that are happening in our community. Record-setting wildfires just occurred, right? We had sweltering high heat this past summer, and it's hard to remember in the middle of winter, but it was record-setting high heat. And then you have a ton of other local impacts, whether it's drought or decreased water supply. And I think people are really starting to understand that there's connections to all of that, and they want to play a role. And the best thing that they can do is get involved at the local level on all those pieces that we talked about in terms of getting engaged in Energy Smart and the services that provide for residents, or Partners for a Clean Environment on the business side, but then also demanding it through our legislators and demanding it through these organizations like Communities for Climate Action. It's not enough. Our policies need to go farther in protecting and stabilizing our climate. And so I think there's, again, that collective action effort. One of our favorite programs are really like neighborhood scale too. So if for example, you can do a bulk purchase for solar in your neighborhood and get all your neighbors to commit to it, then that reduces the price point of the solar and helps, get more solar on in at a larger scale. Those are the types of things that I think can really kind of be the game changers to lift us out of this mess that we're in terms of the climate crisis. But there's so much more in terms of a movement. It's a people's movement at this point. And like I was mentioning earlier, the Sunrise movement itself, as the youth generation kind of pushes forward, they are going to be louder and louder in demanding that, local governments and state governments,
Yes, we will.
national governments are protecting the people with aggressive policies that do not allow for environmental degradation, right? It's a different, I just hope that when my children are, 30 years old, that they are living in a carbon-free world. Like, that would be amazing.
Yeah. And we're going to get it done, Susie. I'm not going to stop. Your children, we can work together. We're going to get it done. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today. And thank you so much for all the work you've been doing for so long. We need more and more people like you out there. I'm going to keep finding them and keep connecting with them and putting us all together so we can get this massive action that we're looking for. Susie, it's really been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
You too, Ethan. Thank you so much for hosting. And I really appreciated the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, everyone. See you next week. Thanks so much for listening to Changing the Climate, a podcast hosted by Climate Change Realty, the most innovative real estate corporation ever conceptualized. Visit ccrboulder.com today.